I about 4 years ago, I started going through some real dark stuff. Some things of my childhood, abuse that literally no one but my wife had ever been even told about or known about. All of these things started coming out into the open, and my story really began to form all on its own and differently than I ever imagined it doing.
Welcome to one of the most listened to music news podcasts in the world, SGNP, with your host, Darren Sutherland. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, artists, and entertainers about their faith, family, and careers. This is information you will not find anywhere else on radio, web, or in a magazine, but only firsthand on SGNP.
SGNP is brought to you by Toccoa Falls College in Toccoa Falls, Georgia. For more information on TFC, call 706-886-7299 or visit them online at tfc.edu. That's tfc.edu. Since 1907, TFC, glorifying God through seeking and developing leaders who will impact the world for Jesus Christ.
And welcome back once again to Southern Gospel News Podcast. Darren Sutherland, my co-host, Arthur Rice. Arthur, because it's coronavirus and we don't know what's going to happen after it's all over with, we're recording, let's just be truthful, we're recording 2 shows in the dead eye of the storm, so to speak. So hopefully by the time this episode airs in a couple of weeks, you and I are hard at work, you singing gospel music at Dollywood, me working with the agency, and we got a few shows built up where we're not worried about SGNP. Well, we are. We want it to do well, but we're worried about our real jobs so we can feed our families. Is that a fair and honest and transparent way to be?
Yes. Absolutely. Hopefully this thing will be over by the time this thing comes out. So you mentioned we had an interview last week with Ernie Haas, and you mentioned this has affected your golf game. Now, is the golf courses closed, or can you get out and play, or is it just because it's raining? It's raining. That's the bad part about it. But it's to shut down all my TV golf, players and masters and. I don't have nothing to watch. I'm just when it's raining like this, so I'm kind of waiting for the rain to quit, and so I can get out there and trudge around in the mud with somebody.
My favorite, and you're going to laugh at this. I think you know this, but other than Southern gospel, my favorite type of music is classic country. I mean, that's just the way it is. I love it. Yeah. And I found this on the antenna TV. Now, folks, you got to remember there's different types of TV. Now, there's cable, there's digital, there's antenna. It's called OTA, and you go locally in Atlanta, and it's off your antenna just like we had when we were kids, and you can watch TV. But your ABC affiliate may have 2 or 3 other channels with it.
Do you have to go out in the yard and turn the antenna?
No, actually, I went to Walmart.
It's not like when I was a kid.
No, it's not. You're exactly right. It's not that bad. And you don't have to put aluminum foil on the tinfoil on the rabbit ears.
When I was a kid, let me tell you, when I was a kid, my dad. Yeah. My dad, we of course we lived out in the country, and so to get good television, he had a 30-foot pole. With a 15-foot antenna on that pole mounted to the side of the house.
Wow!
And when I was a kid, we had to go out depending on what channel we wanted to watch, we had to go out in the yard and turn that channel. Now we got I don't know how many, like 8 channels.
Well, y'all was in the middle. Y'all was halfway between Greenville, halfway in Asheville, and I guess wherever else.
We could get to Asheville, we could get Greenville, we could get Knoxville. And if the wind was blowing right, we could get Charlotte.
Really?
Of course, they were all the same. That was the cool thing about like Sunday mornings, because we'd watch Gospel Singing Jubilee for an hour and a half on Asheville, and then we'd turn it down to Greenville and watch another hour and a half. So we could watch about 3 hours of it.
That's cool. Well, what I was talking about, antenna TV, there's a channel out now
that's owned by Gaylord Entertainment, and it's a partnership with Gaylord and CBS, I believe, called Circle TV. And I don't know if you saw it yet, but
I haven't.
Man, look for it. It is cool. They play. It's almost like the Nashville Network back in the Ralph Emery days when it first started.
Oh, wow.
And Saturday night, I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm going through all this stuff. And this is Saturday night, was a week ago. It was the same morning we all woke up and found out Kenny Rogers died. But they had live from the Grand Ole Opry, and the announcer came on and he said, we're doing this show without an audience because the circle's not going to be broken. And we're going to keep Saturday nights going here at the Opry as long as we can. And on stage that night was Vince Gill, Brad Paisley, and Marty Stewart. And they just sat there and they sang. And have you heard, they sang some different songs, and they sang some gospel songs, because all three of them sing gospel from time to time. Mm-hmm. But have you heard that new rendition of Go Rest High on the Mountain, and the third verse Vince Gill has added to that song? Have you heard?
I caught the end of that the other day on the radio, and that's the last time I heard it. I hadn't heard it since, and actually I forgot about it now. But now that you brought it up, what I heard was amazing.
If that's not the gospel, then the gospel don't exist when you listen to that song. Now, I mean, so many. I couldn't even begin to talk about how many funerals I've been to and heard that song. You know what I'm saying? That people sing. Yeah. How many people have you heard in the gospel music world sing that Vince Gill song? Now he has added that third verse. So I encourage you folks to go online and listen to that song. The past 3 weeks, folks, we've had some great guests on the show, and we've talked about that. And you can always go back to our website, www.southerngospelnewspodcast.com, and listen to great interviews. But Jeff Easter's been with us. Brian Free's been with us. Ernie Haas has been with us. And today, no different. A great soloist who was with the Tribute Quartet for a while, Riley Harrison Clark's going to be with us. And I like talking to these new artists, Arthur, and about their lives and about their road and what made them make this decision. And just being transparent with the audience, I don't know Riley that well. You don't know Riley that well. So you and I are going to have to get to know Riley during this interview. A lot of times when we go on these interviews, you've known people for 30 years, or you've known people for at least 5 or 6. But this time, I mean, I'm excited because this is a brand new artist who's going to be in this business for a long time to come. And he's about where you were, what would you say, 25, 30 years ago?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, anyway, well, let's get him on the line. Remember, if you want to find us on Facebook, you can. Southern Gospel News Podcast. On Twitter, SGNP Podcast. You can find us there. Instagram, we're all over the place. I hadn't been updating our TikTok enough. Maybe I should. And who knows, man? Who knows? But thank you for checking in with us. We'll be right back on SGNP with Riley Harrison Clark.
Hey, I'm Karen Peck Gooch with Karen Peckany River, and you're listening to the best in gospel music right here on SGNP.
Hey, this is Darren, and I'm here for my buddy Mike Lindell and My Pillow. That's right, My Pillow. I got to tell you a little secret, and this is a true story. The other day I'm laying in the bed, I looked at Mary and I said, I'm going to get me some new pillows today. She said, what do you need with new pillows? You got them. I said, I got one that's decent. And I didn't know which one it was. I mean, I knew which one it was, and I pulled the cover off of it, and it was only My Pillow. The rest of them were these ones that we bought from TJ Maxx or Target or Walmart or somewhere that just had worn out their welcome. And you know what, guys? I feel like I needed new pillows. And she said, well, why don't you call My Pillow, because you like the one you got there, and tell them what you're looking for, and they'll help you out. You know what I called, and guess what? They helped me out. They asked me what size I was. They asked me how I slept. Did I sleep on my back or on my side or on my stomach? What felt right? Feathers or, blah, 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 foam. They asked me all these questions. More questions than I ever dreamed about a pillow, and
I got my new MyPillow in the mail, and I've slept right. So with this time change, I've got a great MyPillow going. You want that change in your life? It's real simple. 1-800-338-2330, 1-800-338-2330. Use the code word SGNP. That's right, the code word SGNP. And tell them you heard about this special offer. And when you use that code, you'll get a great discount from the folks at MyPillow. I use MyPillow. You should too. 1-800-338-2330. Use the code SGNP. MyPillow, the official pillow and sleep provider of Southern Gospel News Podcast. And welcome back to SGNP. Darren Sutherland and my co-host, Southern Gospel Music Association President, lead singer of the Kingdom Heirs, Arthur Rice. And Arthur, on the line with us, one of the young upcoming guys in all of gospel music, Riley Harrison Clark. Riley.
Harrison Clark. Welcome.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Hey, man, we're having fun with modern technology because that's all any of us can do. We're hoping by the time...
You are exactly right.
We're hoping by the time this podcast airs in a couple of weeks that we will be laughing about where we were today and what we were doing today when we did this interview.
You know what? That's what we've been telling ourselves here lately. I'm young. I've never lived in something like this. This is all the stuff that y'all talk about. Not to say that you aren't young. I'm just saying that you've lived through a little bit more than I have. This is a situation that I've always felt like we would just end up reading about in a book or seeing on a post or somebody'd be telling me about. But here we are anyway.
You know what's amazing?
Maybe it'll be over soon.
Go ahead.
If we had gone through something like this, back in even the 80s or 90s, without all this technology, well, I'd say probably the 80s, 70s, or 80s, without cell phones and technology and all this stuff, can you imagine how scary it would have been then?
Well, I was talking to my dad about that very thing, and he said no. I mean, he couldn't imagine. And again, I've kind of lived. I mean, I'm 28. I've lived around technology the majority of my life, and to think about this happening, and even in the aspect of holding church services, I think it's been a blessing. You know, and the majority of those for that reason. We've been able to still have church. We've been able to. Of course, I guess maybe you could have just gotten on the line with the pastor and just kept adding people to it. I don't know how that works.
They probably did back in the day. It was a party line, but those were deacons' wives doing that, Riley, back in the day.
Oh yeah, of course.
You said you were 28. I'm 50. Arthur's got me by a couple of years. I know. The only thing that remotely reminds me of years ago compared to now, you know what it is, Arthur? And you'll remember this. It's when
gasoline car.
No. This is the truth. Do you remember when your mom or your grandmother used to clean something, and you would go in there and you'd put your hands on a counter, and then you would pick it up, and it had so much bleach on it, or it had so much Mr. Clean on it, that your fingers would feel like they were caked and they would be wrinkling up like you've been in the bathtub for 3 hours. You know what I'm talking about?
Take you 3 days to get off of it.
I haven't felt that in 35 years. And Tiffany, our producer, has our studio like that. And I am daresome to put my hands on any part of my body right now because, I don't know how much intake of Clorox bleach or something I may have right now. So, anyway, it is what it is. So, Riley,
it is. It's an odd time for sure.
It is. Man, you started this ministry. And any ministry is a business. Have you looked up into heaven and asked the Lord, why now? I mean,
yes. Particularly me, who I'm a year and a half into a solo thing. I mean, He could have done this back whenever I didn't have to worry about how I was going to pay everybody.
Right.
So it's been interesting for me, and I don't know. I've had the conversation with numerous people over the past few days, and I feel. I mean, not that we don't have needs, but I feel for the group owners and the managers, and who, you know, I'm worrying about one family, and there are some owners out there that are worrying about 6 and 7 and or more, and I feel for them. And it's an odd time, and I've never seen something like this happen. We're taking it a day at a time, and I'm getting my boots dirty back in Oklahoma just so I can feed my hungry family, you know?
Yeah. Now, what part of Oklahoma are you from?
In the very northeastern corner. So I'm about 72 miles or so north of Tulsa. I'm actually closer to Joplin, Missouri than I am Tulsa. Joplin's where, you know, we would go to the mall and whatnot because we barely have anything where I'm at.
Wow, you are. So how does a guy in the far northeast corner of Oklahoma get involved in gospel music?
You know, so where I'm from, and now I realize now that I've done this for 10 years, that there was more around me than I thought at the time, but there wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of gospel music really in any genre, in any way, shape, or form where I was. I'm living off a dirt road my whole life. It was nothing but tractors and dump trucks if we were going to work, you know. But I didn't know about a lot of the southern. The only southern gospel music that I would have been even aware of would have been your Gaither stuff on TV. That was the only thing I'd ever really seen until a vocal coach came. He would come to my church every year, a few times a year. He was good friends with our pastor, and we had a great church, a large church. For where we were, we had about 450 to 60 folks in the choir. So this vocal coach, Steve Hurst, would come to our church, and he'd work with the choir a few times a year. And through him doing that, I got a little bit more familiar with the southern side of things, and then I ended up going to his school, which he would have in the summer. I went there the first time I went. I think I was either 13 or 14. I can never remember. And it was there that I was introduced to Mark Trammell and the Tallies and the Martins and the Perrys and the Wisnants. Those were all artists that would come to the school and do an evening concert throughout the week that we were there. And so I got to know a few more of the southern artists, you know, outside of your Gaither side of things, the artists that I would, you know, later obviously be associating myself with. And so I kept going to the school, and I just kind of kept those relationships. And a long story short would be that when I was 18, Gary Castro of Tribute, his tenor singer was coming off the road, and the tenor singer that was coming off the road, Brian, had heard me sing through the school. They would come and they would help teach at the school. And Brian mentioned to Gary, you know, I don't know if you remember this kid, but he's a pretty good singer, and maybe you should check him out. And so Gary called me, and 18 years old, he said, hey, if you want to try out or if you want to do this, be here. And it was maybe 2 or 3 days. Be in Nashville. We're going to leave out, and we'll take you with us. And that was in June of 2010. So, and I went out, and the whole time I went out, I got on the bus, and we were going to the New England states, Maine and Massachusetts and all that. I thought Brian was coming along. I thought that, you know, I would just kind of see how it all happened. Well, the further we got up there, I realized we're not picking Brian up, you know. He's not meeting us. And the only tenor singer on this bus is me. So, and I just, that was 10 years ago. And, man, I never would have imagined that I would have gotten to do the things that I did, because honestly, a lot of people's story is, you know, they worked and they sang in 4 regional groups, if you want to call them that, before they could ever even, you know, get on a bus and I didn't have that. You know, they called me, I hopped on a bus, and it was great. Yeah, well, and then our bus burnt down and we were out of it for about a year. So that was maybe me thinking a little highly of what was happening, but So yeah, I don't know. It was just crazy for me. People ask me all the time, how did you do it? How did you? And honestly, nobody's story's like mine. And so I hate sharing my story because it literally, I was on my face in my room the morning that Gary called me. I said, Lord, you've got to do something. I know I'm supposed to sing. I can't keep running the backhoe. I'm tired of this. You've got to do something. And literally later that morning was when Gary called me. So that was, that story's not like the majority. And granted, I'm getting to live, the hard part now, trying to become a soloist and do something on my own. So, but I learned a lot in those years with tribute and with the guys, and that honestly has helped me in this journey that I'm on now. So,
fun.
Anyway, that's my story.
Arthur, what you got?
That's awesome. Well, it was funny. It's a funny story. We were, I guess we hadn't been together that much with tribute that much, and I really didn't know Riley that much. And we did the first hymn sing recording in Morristown, which has been 8-9 years ago, guess, something like that.
Probably so. Yeah.
And 7, 8, something like that. And so, anyways, Riley and I were sitting together, and we're singing these songs, and he looks at me about halfway through one and says, "I've never heard this song in my life."
I probably looked at you and said it about nearly every song that we sang.
After about the third song he said that, I thought, my word, where are you from? The backside of the moon? Surely you've heard some of these hymns. He said, no. He said, I'm from Oklahoma. I said, my word, no wonder.
Yep. No, we didn't grow up with a hymnal. I never had a hymnal. First hymnal, matter of fact, Gerald gave on that at that recording. Gerald gave me a redback hymnal. First hymnal I'd ever had. He gave it to me, and he wrote in the front, "Glad I could give you your first hymnal." And he dated it, which was, 6 years to 7 years ago. I don't know, but
that's awesome.
And it's interesting. I learned on that tour is genuinely, that's when I learned a lot of the hymns that I know now, and that was halfway through my career as it has been. I would hear a few at churches when we'd go, and they'd sing a song before we'd go up or something, but no, that hymn sing, that really was when I started learning a lot of the hymns. I wasn't around it.
That's what's so funny about most people in our industry that sing it, or they grew up in a singing church, or in a family group or something, or singing around with other groups, and so they have that experience. And so to have somebody that really tells a lot about Riley's commitment to this music is to for his first group, just step right on stage and hit it running. That's awesome.
Oh, it was terrifying. I hated the moments at the end of the concert when all the groups got together and they just started passing mics around. That still terrifies me.
It really does. I've seen it in his eyes.
Yes, I hate that. I hate when those things come around. I try and find myself in the back as far as I can, and it just doesn't work. You always still end up with the mic in your hand.
Arthur, you know what I'm starting to think here? I'm starting to think we need to get Gary Castro on the show, because between the stories Riley's sitting here telling us, and between Josh Singletary saying, "Hey, I didn't know what Southern Gospel was. I grew up in nowhere, Florida, in a town of 25." I mean, it's almost like Gary went to a shopping center and picked out 2 or 3 guys who could sing real good, and said, and say, "Hey, here's gospel music. We're going to sing this and make a living, guys." And y'all said, "Okay." I mean,
yep. Pretty much, Gary. When Gary called me to join, he said, "Hey, do you have any of our music?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did," because we had went to Branson. That's where my family would vacation. My dad owned his own business, and so we couldn't go very far. Branson was really the closest place, so we would always go to Branson. And they were down in Echo Hollow, the amphitheater there in Silver Dollar City. And I remembered that we went there to see them and that we had gotten a few of their CDs. So I told Gary, I said, yeah, I've got all your CDs. I mean, you know, you were running a special and I bought them. So we got off the phone and I went back to my room and I went digging through my CDs, and sure enough, we had bought all their CDs, and I found them still wrapped in the plastic that they came in. I had never opened them. I had never listened to them. So it was all still new music to me. I had never listened to one song that they had sang. Oh well,
that's hilarious.
Hey, man, good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, Riley, you gotta tell me this because I love my buddy Josh of Tribute. Did he ever try to get you to wear the bow tie? I mean,
no, thankfully.
He never said all group members are going to wear bow ties.
No, I don't think Gary would have went for that anyway. Can you see Gary in a bow tie?
No.
I mean, genuinely.
Funny.
No, he never tried to get me to wear a bow tie, but Josh definitely, he kept it alive on the bus, that's for sure.
That's cool. Hey, who's your favorite musician? Who do you admire the most of any genre? I'm not just talking Southern gospel music, but any genre, any musician or any artist. I mean, who does Riley look at and say, man, that person can flat sing? Who stops you in your tracks?
Oh, goodness. Wow. You know, genuinely, it's crazy. It's a loaded question, really, because I've not only sang for more than 10 years, but I've studied as much as I could without going to school. Vocally, I've studied vocally, so my attention to detail in a singer really is, I could put together a really good singer, but to look at one singer by themselves. But I will say, out of all music that I listen to, they're obviously incredible artists, but Larnell Harris is one that I will always go back to. Technically, I love his voice. I love his power. I love the full tones that he sings with and the ease in the majority of cases. I don't know. I mean, but I can't sing a lick of anything in a different language, but I'll put some of Pavarotti's music on and just listen to that, because I can pay attention to a tone and I can listen to a tone, and generally I can figure out and learn about their tones and their placements and how they're going about placing a note. So I don't know. That's really a loaded question. I don't play anything.
You're a student of the business. You're a student of the business, Riley. How would you quantify somebody like David Phelps, for instance? I mean,
oh Lord, I mean, Dave. I mean, he's a great singer. He really, and he was one of the singers, because again, in Southern, if you wanted to classify Gaither in that world, which a lot of people do, and a lot of people understand the difference between Gaither and, Quartet Convention. I believe that there is a difference, but in this world, in the gospel music world, David was one that I always wanted to sing like. I patterned a lot of myself after David, because David was still fresh in the world of singing, and Larnell was not singing as much, obviously. So David was that full voice tenor that I liked to pattern myself after, and I would sing a lot of his. One of my first songs that I would sing out anywhere would be "No More Night," David's arrangement of "No More Night," and so no, I mean him and his tone, and again, it's crazy to think of the places and the things that I've gotten to do, even at my age, and the things that I've walked into that people dream of. I'm very blessed and fortunate, and I've sang on stages with David, and I've gotten to try my best to enjoy it for what it is, but also I'm sitting there with a pen and paper in my head writing down, how he's placing a note or how he's singing this vowel or this consonant. And so it's hard for me to just enjoy a singer because I have to sit back and it's me just trying to learn. I mean, I still work with vocal coaches and will continue to. I teach a lot, but I work with coaches myself because I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to push myself vocally and as an artist. But David Phelps most definitely is one of those that I've I don't know that I've ever heard David pitch a note live, and I believe everyone does, and obviously he does. But I've always been fascinated by the way that he can approach a song, and I love David because I've also seen him in situations when maybe belting the C wasn't going to be what worked best for him that night, and so he played it safe, and I believe that says a lot about an artist. I found myself having to play it safe, numerous times, just because of this reason or that. And I don't know. I think it says something about an artist that doesn't learn a song one way. And that's the only way they're confident in singing it. I believe you should be. It's like a good player, a good piano player. They play all over the piano because they're that confident and comfortable with their instrument. And vocalists should be the same way. And so I appreciate, honestly. Yes, I could go on and on about that question. I don't know that I could ever actually say, this one person in any genre, because Karen Carpenter is probably my all-time favorite female vocalist, and she's nothing spectacular as far as her range, but the smoothness of her voice and her tones. It's hard to beat that. I love Karen Carpenter singing.
I like what you said about Karen Carpenter. I like you. I'm a student of listening to different sounds and different people. And the greatest singers a lot of times aren't the greatest performers. I'm sure we've all seen somebody in a local church somewhere that we've listened to and we've said, man, how come they're not in Nashville? Man, how come they don't have a record? You follow what I'm saying? And then we see some people that come out and they have such a different voice. It's like, where did they come from? I'm going to mention a name that I was just introduced to this past weekend. Arthur, I bet money you don't know who it is. Riley, you may or may not know who it is. But have you heard the guy Blanco Brown sing by chance? Has either one of you heard of him?
What was the name again?
Blanco Brown.
No. I don't think so.
I haven't heard him. No.
No, okay. It's an African-American guy, okay, that sings country pop style music, and I saw him on the Grand Ole Opry rerun about 2 weeks ago. Okay, and I'm sitting there wondering where he was, and my wife's sitting there, and my wife's 43 years old, and she's sitting there just chattering every single word he says, and this, that, and another, and I'm like, where did this guy come from? We are blessed in this world with so many different styles of music and so many great things. So then I look up his Wikipedia, Blanco Brown, and it says influence, gospel, rap, country. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, isn't this crazy how the Lord takes this guy who comes from a gospel music background in Atlanta, Georgia, who sang rap, and now he's doing country, and he's singing on the Grand Ole Opry. Riley, it's very similar to your walk in the fact that you come out of nowhere, Oklahoma. I mean, when you start talking about going to Branson on vacation, it's like me and Arthur when we were kids going to Cherokee, North Carolina. I mean, that's where you just went. Maybe Arthur and them didn't go there. They probably got to go across the mountain to Gatlinburg because they were closer to Cherokee. No. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? And it's amazing how God has put you where he's put you. What, Riley, do you think, and I know it takes a lot of prayer and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of knowledge as you're moving forward in your career, but what led you to this next step? I mean, you're a soloist now, man. You've been doing this for a good year, but what was the feeling that pushed you to that point?
My wife and I had, first of all, and I share this a little bit in some of my solo concerts, about 4 years ago, I started going through some real dark stuff. Some things of my childhood, abuse that no one but my wife had ever been even told about or known about. all of these things started coming out into the open, and my story really began to form all on its own and differently than I ever imagined it doing. And I realized, first of all, the importance of needing to take care of me. It was starting to, emotionally and physically, it was really starting to wear on me. I'd sleep 2 hours a night just because of the anxieties and the whole process of everything that I was having to at that time struggle with. I wasn't dealing with it. I say that a lot. Struggling with something and dealing with something are two different things. And truthfully, I think that I started having to deal with all of these things. My family started having to deal with all of these things, and it got to where my story was starting to form and shape to something more than being a tenor singer. And the hardest thing about making the step that I did was, it's real easy to jump off of a boat when you're unhappy with what's going on, when you're not seeing it go anywhere, when you're frustrated, or maybe somebody outside is pulling you in a different direction. But the truth about it is, everything was going great with the guys. We were at a really high point. We had started being recognized for these things and this and that, and I loved those guys. And it was one of the easiest buses. It's the easiest bus that I've ever spent a long time on. Granted, it's probably one of the only buses I've spent a long time on. But it was all working, and for the Lord to look at me and out of the blue tell my wife and I in two different areas of our lives, in two different times, it's time to start planning for a move. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I've always had to trust God. I mean, I've had to, you've had to understand that God was going to take care of you. But it wasn't until I really started processing the fact that I had to make that step off of the bus and into what God was leading us to. It was at that point that I really had to start believing God. I had to start trusting God, because I didn't see a reason to leave. I thought everyth's great with Tribute. We're being effective, even from the ministry standpoint. We're being effective. Why do I need to move out of that place? And honestly, there's still a lot of that that I have in my heart for as to why. Why did I? But I have been able to share so much about the cracks and the corners of my life and the victories that I've had with my walk and through these issues and these hard times, these dark times of my life, that I wouldn't have been able to share with Tribute, respectively. It's hard to be that when three other people need to also, be involved. And I think that the Lord obviously saw way further down the road than I did. And he knew where I was going to be and what I was going to want to talk about and the things that I was going to address in a ministry of my own. And he knew that I couldn't do that then. And truthfully, we've seen the effectiveness of what I've been able to do in my solo concerts when it's just me presenting my music. And I've seen lives changed in ways that I never would have seen them changed before with Tribute, simply because the opportunity to talk about it wasn't there.
Let me stop you right there for just a second, Riley.
Go ahead.
Can you talk about it here? Is this a format that you can share with us? What could you?
Sure.
Yeah, tell us what it is, because thousands of people listen to us, and here's the great thing about a podcast, and this, is there'll be people that'll listen to this thing the Friday we release it, and there'll be people that listen to this podcast 3 years from now, and your story and your witness is important for those folks. And if you feel like sharing it, I wish you would right now. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you brought it up. So I think I owe it to our listeners to ask you.
Sure. Well, and you know what? I think the hardest thing, and it's something that I'm still dealing with, I'm still working through, is figuring out how to tell and how to present my story for everything that it is, because there are some formats there's some churches that, honestly, and Arthur would maybe understand this when he goes out there, sometimes you can say something and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Because you understand the audience that's listening and you see them for what they are, Right. There's a great love for this music. There isn't always it's not always the opportunity that you walk out on stage and you feel that people are there because they're desperate for a move of God. And I think that's where people need to understand the difference in what we do. Do we entertain? Yes, we most definitely do. We're giving them something that can bring them joy and walk them out of a situation in their life for 2 hours. And we're presenting that to them. But it's also in our hearts that we want to present the gospel to them in a way that we let them know that they can come expecting God to move. And there are some churches that, when you walk in, that the whole front 5 rows, they don't want you to sing. They want you to simply be who you're supposed to be and who God has for you in that evening. And there are other churches that want to hear you hit songs. And I understand both. So with that dilemma, for lack of better words, I've had to try and figure out a way to present my issues. But so for numerous years in my childhood, I was abused, and in a couple different ways. And I never told my family about it. I never told anyone about it until I met my wife. And numerous years after we had been together in dating, she was the only person I would ever tell about this abuse. And in abuse, because of abuse, that leads to an avalanche effect of a million different things that take place in your life and in your mind. And I've struggled with depression and anxiety to a needing to get help level. Some people wake up and they just kind of feel a little bit heavy some mornings, and other people find themselves having a panic attack every other day. And I did. I just didn't know that that's what that was. And so numerous years through my childhood, I would deal with it. I would struggle with this, and I wouldn't let anybody in enough. Well, about 4 years ago, when my second child was born, I had 3 dreams before she was born, and I only told my dad about these dreams. 2 of those dreams, neither my wife or Charlie would make it out of the hospital. And for obvious reasons, I didn't tell Megan about these dreams. And then I had another dream the week before we went in to have Charlie, that Charlie would make it out and Megan would not. Well, obviously there's a massive pressure with all of this. We get into the hospital. She begins to deliver the baby. Everything looks perfect. And it went from perfect to me being handed OR garb and, saying, "You're the only one allowed in the room." And it literally went, I can't remember anything other than they say, "Here, go put this on and we'll meet you in the hallway." And I stood by myself in that hallway for what felt like an eternity. And it was like right then the pressure cooker top had just been flipped. And I started at that moment. Of course, we get in, and a few minutes goes by, and Charlie's in the corner. She's fine. Everything's great with her. And I look over, and Megan's not responding. So, okay, two dreams were out of the picture, but there's still this last one of Megan not going home with us. And all of that brought on this massive avalanche of everything I had ever bottled up. And I went home and I realized that I've not dealt with anything. And this is something that, I was raised with, you and the Lord can handle it. And my parents were that way even when I began dealing with a lot of this stuff. You and the Lord can handle it. And while I do believe that me and the Lord can handle anything, that's only when you believe that the Lord wants to handle something with you. And I had gotten to the place that I didn't feel like the Lord should want to handle something with me. I didn't feel like he cared about me enough. And it just got darker and darker and darker. And so as I go on, as I'm trying to figure all of this out by myself, the Holy Spirit spoke to my wife one day, and my mom and dad were at our home visiting, and she just told my mom on the couch about everything. My childhood, and again, I'm 24 years old at this time, and nobody had ever known about any of these things. And she tells my mom, and I get home from being out with my dad, and Megan pulls me to the side, and she said, "Hey, I've got to tell you something." And she said, "I've just told your mom everything." Of course, I'm like, "Okay, cool. What's everything?" And she told her that she had told her everything that only Megan knew. And the Riley at that time, the one that had been around, would have turned the home inside out. But for whatever reason, this incredible peace came over me. And I started being able to deal with, we started finding folks that would help me understand that God did want to help me with this. We would get involved in some organizations near us that would help me get to a better place in my faith and physically and mentally. And the hard thing about all of this is that you've still got so many people that I talk to and that I sing to that are still of the mindset that you and the Lord can handle anything. And again, while I believe that 1,000%, do I believe that God could have just walked me right out of that? Yes, I do. But at the time, I wasn't able to receive that. That wasn't anywhere even close to what I thought I could have for myself. And so while the Lord could have done something miraculous, some burning bush idea of things, he didn't. But what did happen is a lot of people began to walk into my life and speak into me. And I was a part of organizations that would lead me into this better. This is me being completely vulnerable, but the last year that I was at the convention with the guys, nobody could find me, and my wife ended up finding me behind the banner in our booth, sitting under the table, having an awful panic attack, and something that I couldn't at that time control. I didn't know how. I didn't know, and I was still trying to work through all of this. And so the depression and the anxiety of things that I've had to deal with and walk through is something that people don't talk about, but it's something that I'll bring up. And my solo project that's out now, I'm working on something new, but what's out now is it's really raw and it's vulnerable, and there's a lot of that I believe has its place. And then you bring in the abuse. I rarely bring up abuse in a solo concert, but y'all, I was in Lynchburg, Virginia, the end of last year, and for whatever reason, I brought up abuse and just briefly mentioned it. I walk outside, and I'm standing by the merchandise table. It was set up outside the front of the church that we were at. And a man around, I believe he said he was 60, some mid-60s, he walks up to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, I'm 60, I believe he was 64 years old. He looked at me in the eyes with tears rolling down his face. He said, I'm 64 years old, and I've never felt like I could tell anybody about the abuse that I suffered. And he said, and it's every day that I walk with that. Every day it comes across my mind. And so while it's still something that a lot of people aren't talking about or aren't even wanting to talk about, mostly I think it's because they don't know how to talk about it, it's something that I'm able to mention. And it's something that I'm able to say, again, whether it's briefly or at the table, go in depth into my story more. I'm able to minister in a way that I've not seen people be able to respond to and bring it. And I believe the anxiety of today is something that's so heavy in a good majority of lives. They don't recognize it, or they think that, well, I just need a little more sleep. And while that's true, there's so much to be said about the mental side of things, and scripturally, where we're supposed to take care of not just our physical bodies, but our mental selves and our spirit and our soul, and invest in that however we know to. And a lot of that is through the Word of God, but a lot of that is sitting down with like-minded people, somebody that maybe is a few steps further in the journey than you are, and being able to say, okay, well, here I am, and how do I get to where you are, or how do I get past this? And so I'm able to, in a lot of ways, address the anxieties and the oppression and the depression that we're walking around. And I say this often, while we're presenting folks an opportunity to, for a few minutes or for a couple hours, leave their situations outside in the car, I hope that people are bold enough to begin bringing those situations into the church, into the venue, and leaving them there, because it's not doing any good for anyone to leave them in the car and then grab them. Enjoy a couple hours of peace, sure, but then hop in your car and you're still having to deal with the things that you were before. I think that there's a lot of people that could be at a better place because of simply realizing that there are folks out there that, like myself, I want to invest in you beyond just you coming and hearing my music, but I want my music to go home with you, and I want my music to live with you, and I want something that I say in a concert to live with you in a way that's going to help you change, in a way that's going to help you further yourself beyond the hurt and the pain that has been caused, that wasn't your fault, all the shame that you carried that you have nothing to do with. It was something that someone dumped on you. There's ministry there that I believe is so very important and vital, particularly to the church. There are pastors that I've spoke with after a concert that are dealing with this weight of not being able to talk about the things that are beyond what people think to mention. Pastors that are hurting because they feel the weight of hurt in their church, and they feel the weight of wrongdoings, whether it was towards them or towards someone of their church that they're having to listen to. There's so many people that are hurting out there that don't realize that they can talk about it. And while I haven't figured out the exact way to go about doing it, while I haven't figured out a perfect way to present it in my program, it's a goal of mine to do so. And letting people know that, you know what, there is one thing that every single one of us have in common, and that's hurt. And that's brokenness. But there are two things that we can have in common, and that's healing. A lot of people don't allow themselves to get to the place of, or they feel like they've dealt with it for so long that, you know, I'll make it without it. You know, it's not going to keep me from heaven. No, but it'll let you hurt until you get there, you know?
Wow.
And there's an opportunity to be healed. But a lot of people don't know how to respond to that. They don't know how to react to that. And again, while I haven't figured it out, I'm trying, and I feel like that's a lot of my story.
You know what the beautiful thing about this is, Riley? You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to figure it out. You can just tell it. You know, this has been, I'm going to say this, and Arthur, you can agree with me or not. Well, before we came on the air, we said, what do we talk to Riley about? And Arthur said, well, I've met him a few times. I said, I've never met him. I don't know what we're going to talk about today. And I keep a list of questions here, and I do my homework, and I knew who you sang with, and I knew how long you sang, and I knew you were from Oklahoma. But you see, even in this podcast thing that we've got here, the Lord has allowed you to speak today to somebody out there that we don't know, okay? And the church has left the building, so to speak. And whatever abuse you went through, you've lit a spark in somebody out there that you'll never meet this side of heaven. And, you know, that's something that, quite frankly, that you can embrace. Wouldn't you say, Arthur?
Yeah. That you know, that thing of trying to figure it out. And I understand. I get what you're saying, and I understand that part of it. But part of that, trying to figure it out, is the devil not allowing you to share your heart. And I want to encourage you to, if the Lord impresses you to share it, then share it, just like you did.
Yeah.
Share it, and let Him deal with the consequences.
Yeah. So I believe that. I mean, I do believe that, and truthfully, I've felt that be the case, because I'm now more than ever. Again, I understand singing the hit songs. I love that side of it. I absolutely love that side of it.
Part of it.
But I feel so much and so strongly about the positive side of where I'm at now. And am I still dealing with things? You better believe it. I mean, we're still getting help. And this is something that affected my marriage. It could have affected my ministry. And in a lot of ways, to be completely vulnerable, it should have affected my ministry. Yeah. But I was able to, with knit gloves, listen to counsel of others, listen and be as available as I could be, while keeping myself safe as I'm dealing with what I was, you know. And I don't know. I just feel so strongly about where I am now, and I've seen the effectiveness in what I've been able to do and say and sing thus far, that that's what I want to do. Those are the things that I want to walk into. And I always, for a long time in my life, I always felt like I didn't have a story beyond I'm a sinner saved by grace, And while that is story enough, I didn't realize that, 4 years ago I would be having to have a story. I would be given a story whether I wanted it or not, and I would be having to deal with that story. And I've just I've seen the effectiveness, I've seen the positive side of and I've seen the lives changed genuinely.
Riley, let me stop you just for a second there. I'm going to do something that I've never done on this show before, and Arthur knows this. My producer, Tiffany's sitting here. She's roughly 20. How old are you, Tiffany? 26, 22?
25.
25. You sat and you heard every word Riley said, okay? And you've got your own story. We're not going into that by no means. But when he talks about his story and he tells what he went through, does that not encourage you? If he was in this town, you may go hear his story before you ever go hear him sing.
Yep.
Am I safe to say that?
Yeah, the story would definitely, it would encourage me to go and meet him and just talk with him.
So, my friend, I'm telling you, your story, if God led you out of a great group, and your story, and I don't want to say this economically, but your story's gold, okay? Because God will get glory out of every situation. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Arthur, do you get what I'm talking about here?
Yep, absolutely.
The story and the ministry are more important than the song, my man. And guess what?
Yeah.
Through the ministry, but through the ministry and through the story, the songs will come. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiffany don't go listen to gospel music. She grew up with it. Her dad led music in a church, but you don't listen to it every day today, do you?
I sure do not.
The only thing you listen to is what we post on the Facebook, right?
I sure do.
Okay, but you would go hear somebody like Riley.
Yeah, I would go listen to the story, and then that was what would lead me to the music. That's what I would do. I would want to hear how you overcame your daily depressions and anxieties from abuse, because we're not getting into it, but I've been in the same situation. So I would want to hear how God helped you so that he could help me.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow.
That's,
Man.
Well, now I know why I did the podcast today.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, thank God's timing is just perfect.
Yeah.
Riley, I'm gonna tell you something funny, okay? You don't know this. Arthur don't know this. I am more thankful for doing this interview today than I was for talking to Charlie Daniels, than I was for talking to Brian Free a couple of weeks ago. Not that these folks aren't my friends. More than I was talking to Peg McCamey. And guess what? And this is a true story, and I'm going to just be blunt as I can, just totally transparent as I can on this, okay? Before we got you on the air, I said to Arthur, I'm doing this as a favor to April because she's been so good to me and helping me do some things, and she wants to help this artist, and she believes in this artist, okay? I said that to Arthur, and that's no slight on you, okay? But
I understand.
What we didn't realize, okay? And this is what's giving me cold chills sitting in this studio, and I'm just shaking here, sitting here thinking, and Arthur knows I don't get like this very often. I'm a cut up on this show most of the time. But what we didn't realize is God had something bigger than just this for us today and for you today. Is that fair, Arthur?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm more thankful for this interview than I was than I was for those other ones. And I love doing those other ones because guess what? You, my friend, are going to help somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I never could. That Arthur never could. So, anyway, Tiffany, have I ever put you on the air before?
Nope.
Okay. I mean, nobody's never heard Bo Snerdley when what's his name? Rush Limbaugh's talking on the radio. Okay, she's my Bo Snerdley. Nobody never hears that. Arthur, what's your reaction to all this today?
Wow. It just shows me how God's timing is just perfect. We can plan all this stuff and we can put all this stuff together, and, and he just shows up and it's amazing. It really is. It's just absolutely amazing. Riley, I can't thank you enough for being so open and honest. And I believe God is going to use you greater than you can even imagine. And he's already used you.
Arthur, you're the president of the SGMA. You're a future Hall of Fame member. If you've seen Riley somewhere in town, would you want to go hear him now?
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm sold, my man.
Yeah.
And guess what? I can hear any gospel group anytime I want. I can get a free CD. I can get a free download from anybody in America. But right now, you're one of my favorite because you're truthful. Does that make any sense, Arthur?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. Because I don't know, and it's the way the devil works. Fear is something I see what people see in me jumping off of a bus that had it all going on.
Who cares?
And wondering why, and that's something that has. But I say that to say thank you. I truly appreciate what you've just said. Because I don't know. I could have stayed and I could have sang with numerous others. But I believe in. I don't believe that I've walked through what I have to keep it to myself, and I do believe that there's something to be said about it.
When you know what it is. It's affirmation that you did exactly what God wanted you to do.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And I appreciate y'all, and I appreciate you saying what you did.
Well, it's the truth. And guess what I'm gonna do on my end, okay? And I mean this with all my heart. I'm gonna tell Danny Jones. I said, Danny, you need to get Riley on your show. You need to get him talking on your show. I'm going to tell Daniel Britt up Joy FM, hey, man, whether you play his songs or not, you need to get him on your show. People need to hear this guy's story. And, hey, let's kind of get on another beat. And we've loved on each other and we've hugged as close as we could with this coronavirus and shook each other's hands. Before we get out of here, Riley, what's the most useless talent you have in life?
Well, I don't know necessarily if it's a talent, but I am reminded this week of where I came from. And some people know and some people don't. I always tell people that my dad owned a heavy equipment business. And while he did that, we said heavy equipment business because grave digging was a little bit more raw. And I've been here for a week, and I've dug about 15 holes since I've been here. And I am again reminded where I came from, from grave digging to gospel singing.
Most everybody thinks that they can shovel, that they know how to shovel, but there's an art to shoveling. Am I correct?
You had better believe it.
There's an art to shoveling. Yep.
Hilarious.
Yep. No, I've buried thousands of people in my lifetime, so I don't know if it's a talent, but you know who to call when things get rough. I'll tell you that.
Awesome.
Oh, man.
Oh,
man. Well, Riley, once again, tell everybody where they can find out. We could stay here another hour and have a great time. We're going to get you back on the show before long. But tell everybody where they can get your music, where they can find you on the web, and when they find you on the internet and download your songs on Spotify and all that kind of good stuff, or how they can find Riley Harrison Clark.
Well, that's just it. Anywhere you find music, anywhere you listen to music, Riley Harrison Clark is how to find me. Facebook, Instagram, all of those, anything and everything that is being used right now. You find me under Riley Harrison Clark or Riley Harrison Clark Music. My website is RileyHarrisonClark.com. That's how you can book. And you mentioned April. I'm signed with the April Potter Agency, so bringing me into an event or whatever it may be, that's the way to go about that. But the easiest way to know about everything that I'm a part of and what I'm doing and how I'm doing it is to follow me on social media, but also to frequently visit my website, RileyHarrisonClark.com.
Man.
And I really appreciate you guys for having me on the show. Thank you for doing it. And I hope it's been encouraging to you and all those that are listening. But I'll be honest with you, it's been encouraging to me. So
good.
I really appreciate it.
Good, buddy.
Well,
hang in there. Keep telling folks about Jesus.
There you go.
Yep, I'll do my best.
Wow, Arthur.
That's a great way to explain it right there. Wow.
I mean,
awesome.
Folks, you know, this is nothing against T. Graham Brown. This is nothing against Marty Rayburn. This is nothing against Peg McCamey, against Russ Taff, against Ray Dean Reese, against all our friends that we've had on, from Jason Clark to from Jason Crabb to whoever. This one today, Arthur, made me realize more than ever why we're here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Well, not only was it affirmation for him, it was affirmation for us too.
Yeah.
You know?
You remember, Arthur, this, and you and I had this conversation. Believe it or not, folks, Arthur and I, we talk more on this show than we do in we never talk in person unless I'm up there, and I've only been up there around him, 2 times in the past 2 years because of my heart surgery. Yeah. But you and I talked at National Quartet Convention a year ago in September, and we said, people are going through things, and we'd like for the show to kind of help people from time to time and go with things and see what people would do. And we realized we would have to build up a camaraderie over time. And, we had Tarenda Green on, and she talked about depression and went down that road. Then we had Russ Taff on, and he talked about, he talked about alcoholism and this, that, and another. And then Jeff Easter a couple of weeks ago brought up divorce, and it was the first time ever you spoke about it, and really the first time I've ever spoke about it. And then now, today, we go through this situation where we're talking about abuse. And yes, we have conversations with others, and we pick at the industry, and we say, oh, that's wrong, let's peel that off the wall, let's do that. But man alive, when we get it, it's just like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but it's and I don't think I am. But it's like the Lord's letting us take the wallpaper and the paneling off the walls, and we're seeing the brick and mortar, and we're saying, hey, this is what the Christian life's all about helping each other and lifting each other up. What do you think?
Yeah. We're all broken people. And we're all, doing the best we can with the Lord's help, and that's that's what we got to do, is depend on Him to help us through this. But we got to depend on each other to help us do it too. And it's always it always seems to help when someone else is going through, because that's the devil's ploy and greatest weapon is to make us think that we're the only one. Well, you're the only one that thinks this way. You're the only one that's been treated this way.
And here's what I want to tell our listeners. Share your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Share them. They're hard to do. Okay? When I tell folks my experiences, it's hard sometimes. It really is. And that don't mean go out here's what I loved about Riley, okay? And this is honest goodness truth. He could, if he wanted to, now think back to the 70s and 80s, Arthur. He could take this story and he could work it up in a way that would have the crowd standing on their feet, screaming and hollering. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
All right? But dude's got a story, and dude just wants to tell it unadulterated and just straightforward. I think every preacher that hears this show ought to get on and invite him to his church. I really do. And I ain't never said that about no singer. I ain't never said that about nobody. And, folks, I didn't go through the abuse myself, so please don't think I'm jumping on his bandwagon. I'm just telling you how impressed Darren was today, and that'll be the end of it on my side. But, it's a good word. A lot of people need help, Arthur. A lot of people need help, man. And just think, we ain't even thought about coronavirus in 45 minutes. What about that?
Sure. How about that? Hopefully it'll be out of here by the time this thing airs.
What's that now?
I said, hopefully it'll be out of here by the time this thing airs.
No doubt.
Great show today.
It was, man. It was worth the time. It was worth the time. And, ain't you a Tennessee fan, Arthur?
Yeah. Well, I live in Tennessee, 'cause you kind of have to be.
Yeah. Well, if you're a Tennessee fan, you won't catch coronavirus, don't you?
Why's that?
Because people wearing orange jerseys don't catch anything.
I heard that.
Jeff Chapman will like it because he's a Bulldog fan like I am. So anyway, buddy, what's wrong with living right anyway?
Not one thing.
Not a thing. Thank you, man. You've been listening to SGNP.
SGNP is excited you chose to listen today. If you'd kindly leave a remark and rating in the podcast remarks section, we surely would appreciate it. Please share with a friend or family member. Look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and our new website, SouthernGospelNewsPodcast.com.